toxicity, especially in a school setting, is when they value the rankings first, education
Mm.
second.
It is also good that you like one of the things that you mentioned is that going into your hobbies or your passions, like pushing yourself to do that, and you're making sure you're not idle. Because like I think some people have this idea that you always have to think about your feelings, when in fact sometimes you're not supposed to dwell too much. Like there's a appropriate amount of time where you're sad, where you're mad and everything, but you're not supposed to like push and stay in that emotion, because at the end it's not healthy for you to stay in those kind of negative emotions. You should still push yourself to do something, push yourself to like really try.
I don't have the most. I don't have the prettiest nose, so basically that's um.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing, okay, scratch that. I have a pretty nose. Okay, it's more
Yeah.
of.
Hi guys, it's Yun and welcome to episode 10 of Toxic Talks. And today I'm actually with last week's mutual friend. Yeah. So introduce yourself. You're
Hi
pretty
guys.
e-girl.
Hello. Thank you. I'm very feeling. I'm Ali. You can call
Mm.
me Ali, and I'm a communication research major from UP Diliman, and that's it basically. I'm Yoon's friend, and we're here. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
I'm happy to have you here, especially from a UP student. Oh, I'm kidding. I'm not going to put that pressure on you. You're
Oh
so.
no. What if this is just like a school bashing? I don't know.
Oh
National
no.
entire UP. Oh no. Na joke
Oh
lang, joke
no.
lang.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anyway,
joke lang.
so before we start, like I said, the things we will say are our opinions, and we don't represent the school. And people in the schools we've been through, we gone to, may have gone through different things, and they might have actually had a good, healthy experience in that school, but maybe we didn't. So just saying it's still an opinion, it's an experience. So don't come back at us or take it. If you mention schools that you want to go into, don't take us as your reference as to should we or not go to this school. And yeah. Anyway, continuing on. So like I mentioned, Ali is my friend, and she's actually Craven's best friend, and that's how we got to know each other. Yeah. Do you want to share more about that, about our friendship?
I mean, it's so weird. High school was a
Mm-hmm.
fever dream, honestly.
Uh-huh.
So, for full transparency rin, so Craven is also my ex. So, we actually got closer nung nag-break na kami.
Yeah.
Which is very, very, I mean, like, Craven's still a really, really, like,
Mhm.
great and
Yeah.
best friend. So,
Um.
I guess we started off in a, not really in a weird way. I would say unconventional way.
Yeah.
It is nice. I mean, I like
Mhm.
unconventional friendships then.
Yeah. True.
And I'm super, super happy to get to know you as like, you know, as we, ano ba, habang tumatagal yung panahon. Okay. So,
Yes.
mm-mm.
Exactly. I guess to add to that, to context wise, so Craven being my best friend, and then she ended up being best friend to lover with Craven. She just went to me because I also ended up loving Craven at one point. So she was like, "How did you deal with him back then?"
Yeah, how
And
did it
that's
go?
yeah. How did you deal with the feelings? How did like this, like that? We're not gonna expose Craven too much, but
Mm-mm.
technically he's at fault. He's at fault.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
It's men. Men.
Yeah.
That's all
Okay.
I
Let
can
that.
say, men.
That's men. That's a whole different topic. We're not going into that. Anyway, last week we talked about toxicity within school, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do with Ali as well. And this is a different perspective, different schools and different experiences. So she's also just gonna help me wrap things up. And before we get into that, I am curious as to what is toxicity for you. Define it in your own words.
Basically, toxicity for me is anything negative. It's something or a connection, a situation that doesn't really facilitate growth anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
that's toxicity for me. If you feel like you're getting more negative energy than you are positive, then that's something, that's something toxic.
Yeah, it's really true. I relate to that because like negativity, it might just be an emotion and or like a atmosphere, and you might not actually be like doing anything, but it affects you. Like whatever this person feels, you kind of also like if they're negative, you also end up negative, although you're not actually supposed to be directly affected. Because I personally felt that during this pandemic, like being certain people like who are pessimists, and I'm not necessarily optimist but a realist in a sense, like I want to like there's a possibility of something better happening, but then they'd be like no, everything's bad, and I'm like but so yeah, anyway, so Craven a while ago mentioned that school itself is not toxic, but it's more on the system or maybe the students or the teachers. So I want to hear about you. Like, what is exactly toxic for you in a school environment?
I think toxicity, especially in a school setting, is when they value the rankings first, education
Mm.
second. So in this like Philippine setup, we don't really facilitate growth. It's like
Mm.
everyone's on a race, but like the way I would describe it is like we're constantly racing, we're constantly competing against each other, but we don't really see that competition, that race is you're just basically going
Mm-hmm.
in circles. So that's one thing for me. And one thing that's also something like one way I would see, or one way I would describe a toxic setup, especially in a school setting, is when they don't have proper values. So
Mm.
religion aside, since we have different belief
Yeah.
systems, I feel like it's more of when your system doesn't really show empathy, or they don't really
Mm.
students as students, but like guinea pigs or rats
Mm-hmm.
in a sense. That's toxic for me.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. That's one way I would describe toxicity in a school setting.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. And for me, I remember like both of us being the same batch of like being the first 11 and 12. And I remember just thinking like we're the trial and error batch because we're the first batch and everything. And then they're working through what would work best with us, what would not. And they weren't also, from what I know, they weren't actually taking feedback from the students themselves. Like they would always just like think of what's best in their perspective, and in fact
Yeah,
you're supposed to take input on like in a general sense, like hey, what how do these majority of like the classmates, do they learn in a certain way, because everyone has a different way of learning. Some are very visual, and then there are certain teachers that teach the way they want to teach. They don't like you said, there's no empathy where like they accommodate certain things. Like let's say they're very visual, so they would want pictures. Just it doesn't mean like it's dumb to have pictures. It's just that it works well for them. But then there are others, they like just words. They just like reading a
yeah.
lot, stuff like that. And it's normal. Like I understand that they can't accommodate like individually.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think they should, in a sense, in a general sense, like try to make curriculums very general in the sense that it accommodates a lot instead of like a
That's very true.
specific niche.
Yeah.
Because there are certain ones where they just accommodate to those who are good with reading. They're really good with like reading assignments, stuff like that. But then they won't do another thing for those who could catch up. Like there should at least be something like some a little diversity or like
Yeah.
flexibility or creativity with learning things. Yeah.
Everything's so cookie cutter right now.
Mm,
Especially in the online setup. As much as
yeah.
in my university, at least we have INCs where we could catch up whenever we need to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one way to see, the toxicity is when you see that the students are incredibly overworked. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
Raven may have like mentioned that before, that
Mm-hmm.
um as much as we would like to learn as much as possible, especially during the school setup, I think
Mm-hmm.
one thing that we really have to learn as a system is that we can't go back to normal, or we can't go back to the way it is. And
Yeah.
especially with school, we can't
Mm-hmm.
we can't learn everything online, especially with
Mm-hmm.
courses like engineering. And
Yeah.
while it's possible, it's not the ideal way to do it.
Yeah.
So I think, in a sense, um, the school systems are basically really pressuring us to do our best,
Mm-hmm.
but given like
Yeah.
this setup, it's like it. You can see the Filipino resiliency there.
Yeah.
That's one thing. That's one thing I would. I think that's one way to describe, toxicity in a school system. It's when
Mm-hmm.
you see the Filipino resiliency. It's
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Because it's an outcome of them having to keep trying, although
Yeah,
it's a system that keeps like attacking them or keep bringing them down.
yeah.
Yeah. And you, from what I've heard, you've been to a lot of schools, experienced a lot of things. So what is something you could share that was really toxic or harmful for you?
Um. So okay, so I've dealt with a lot of a lot of schools, and I feel like one recent toxic situation would be online schooling. So I
Mm-hmm.
really thought I would get the hang of it since, with my previous school, we basically had to do remote learning. So we went
Mm-hmm.
to school, but we also had homework. We also had to submit things online. So I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's fine, everything's fine. But this last sem specifically, it was really really bad because they fit, a 5 month long semester. They fit that into like three months.
Whoa, why would
So
they?
it was very very physically, emotionally, mentally taxing for
Mm-hmm.
everyone because we
Mm-hmm.
basically, not only did we had to like fit everything in within those 3 months, we basically had to overwork everything because, as much as I get the our professors like sentiments and why they had to do it, they actually gave us more work than they would
Mm.
during, a normal semester. Like, we
Yeah.
wouldn't have the same amount of readings if it were face to face. So it was really bad. I had to read, let's say, four papers per class a week. So if you like measure that, I would read like 12 papers a week, and then on top of that we would make like 1,000+ word assignments. So it was incredibly difficult. I don't blame, our professors at all because they really had to make do with what we had. But
Mm-hmm.
it's the system. We weren't My school is very known, it's really known as a school that's very vocal.
Yeah.
And no matter how vocal we were about it, no matter how many times we brought the issue up, um the school didn't do anything about it. They basically apologized, that's it. They offer the
See.
INCs, but they didn't really extend the sem like we wanted.
Mm.
It was really difficult. So I guess in a way that you could call that toxic because I honestly feel like I didn't learn at all.
Wow, I can't imagine like that situation, especially I guess their sentiments is that I guess with from what I heard, online they think online is like easier because everything's just like access or something like that, and they thought that you could do more because you just have, you know, you're not like the time to go commuting or like those cut like they think those things are cut like having that's what I've heard. That's why one of the reasons like why do you guys have such a hard
Yeah.
time? Because you're just at home, right? Like everything you can have everything there and that. So I'm really sorry that you went through that. That was that must have sucked like really. Yeah.
It's okay. I mean, I don't blame my profs at all, though there are
Mm-hmm.
questionable profs in my
Yeah.
school. But I do see that they're also very pressured. They're also very stressed. My
Mm-hmm.
mom is a prof, and I
Uh-huh.
can see, it doesn't affect just the students. It
Yeah.
affects faculty members as well. So
Yeah,
it's
and
the
mhm. Yeah,
it's the institution.
it's not like the teachers themselves. Like it's because they're following a curriculum that's not even necessarily made by them. There's another department that holds all
Yes.
those things and they're the one that like you have to meet this quota and all these things, all these numbers of like they have to learn that and this. So yeah, it's really hard being in that position where like I'm and I'm pretty sure they also remember being students, you know, like they will
Yeah,
also be like, and they would also think like, did I experience this? Did I, you know, like they could also be, you know,
that's also
yeah.
one thing. I think there's this dissonance also,
Mm-hmm.
especially with profs that tell us like, you have it easier. We didn't have,
Mm.
online schooling. We didn't have the internet. I think some profs still share those sentiments, so they
Mm.
can't really
Mm-hmm.
put themselves in our
Yeah.
shoes. So
Yeah.
I do see that right now it's more of focusing on our own individual struggles. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to, I think one thing that's also toxic is how we view these problems in a sense. Like, since we're
Mm-hmm.
very consumed with how we feel and how
Mm-hmm.
we go about things. For students, we focus on our struggles. For
Mm-hmm.
teachers, we focus on their struggles. We don't
Mm-hmm.
really see halfway. We don't
You
really meet
yeah, you don't
halfway.
meet in the middle. Yeah, that is the hard part. Because if there was this communication between them, like you would work a solution out of it. But everyone's just like, I guess it's kind of like a survivor's mentality. Like, okay,
Yeah,
you know what? I'll just take care of myself. You do you like stuff like that.
yeah.
So that was really hard. And how did you cope with that? Or are you coping with it that though? Like how did you manage to go through that toxic situation or experience?
Well, right now I have two courses to complete, and honestly, I just cope by going through it. I mean, there's no other way but through. So that's one
Mm-hmm.
way. I don't want to put it in like, I don't want to frame it in a sense that it sounds like toxic positivity. But
Mm-hmm.
what I did basically, if I didn't, if I felt frustrated, I would try to use like certain outlets. I would rest, I
Mm-hmm.
would eat, I would sleep, I would cry. It really
Mm-hmm.
was a process because during in the span of 3 months, I honestly don't remember going to like synchronous classes because it was really that bad. So I went,
Mm-hmm.
it was a very heavy time. And one way for me to cope was basically, I started tarot reading more, so that's one thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it really helped me get in touch, spiritually. I have like certain practices, but I guess one thing that really helped me was, um, really just reminding myself to take care of myself. Like, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to put that pressure on me. I didn't want to
Yeah.
put that pressure given everything that's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I coped also by, really hanging out with my friends on Discord,
Mm-hmm.
being active, in my org. So
Mm-hmm.
that socialization really helps.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. You'll deal with it a lot more. You'll deal with it harder if you just go through it alone. So that's one thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's great points that you made because I think when everything happened, everyone just kind of isolated themselves. Like not even just a school setting, but like everything just within this pandemic, everyone would just like isolate themselves. Some would say they're just tired of looking at the screen because that's all they ever see, and which is tiring. But I think at the end, it's still good to say at least you know what, there's people who also feel the same way, and we're all in this together. Not necessarily the same boat, but in the same sea. We're all going through that, and it is also good that you like one of the things that you mentioned is that going into your hobbies or your passions, like pushing yourself to do that, and you're making sure you're not idle because like I think some people have this idea that you always have to think about your feelings when in fact sometimes you're not supposed to dwell too much. Like there's a appropriate amount of time where you're sad, where you're mad and everything, but you're not supposed to like push and stay in that emotion because at the end it's not healthy for you to stay in those kind of negative emotions. You should still push yourself to do something, push yourself to like really try. And that's why it's good that you had friends. So it must have helped that sometimes on days you didn't want to try, someone's gonna be like, no, you got this, where you can
Yes.
do
Or
this.
like that collective stress, when
Mhm.
one person's stressing, it's really it's bonding. Like even
Mhm.
though even though everyone's feeling bad or stressed, I think that company or that interaction
Mhm.
really helps. It's not necessarily sharing that negative energy, it's basically
Mhm.
understanding, validating each other's feelings.
Yeah.
So in a sense, what I have right now with my friends, is very healthy, and I appreciate,
Mhm. That's
their
great.
presence.
Yeah, and I think one of the elements that you need while being in problems is, humor. Like you can
Yeah.
humor and say, you could like say stuff like, "Look at me. I feel like I'm not gonna finish this." Yeah, me too. Like like it's not to like share negativity, but it's just a joke around.
Yeah.
Like you'll ask, "How many backlogs do you have?" And like you'll say this many, and then like there's this
Yeah.
competition, but it's not a bad sense. It's just like you're just like bantering, saying, "Oh, I
Yeah.
have this much," and you're just like laughing, and then later on you're like, "You know what? Go ahead, go. You need to do that."
Yeah.
Like at the end, you're gonna push each other after expressing healthily that you don't want to do it. Later on at the end of the conversation, but you both of you push each other and say, "No, we have to do this," both of you, like that. So
Yeah.
humor is a really good part of like any relationship, because it helps with like dealing with things and making it a little light.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's true.
Yeah. And then, so you mentioned that it's the system that is wrong, not necessarily it's just that everything else is directly or indirectly affected. And so is there like specific people that you're like thinking of that, oh, they should help, they should really like do something, like, or should have or could have helped?
Well, there's someone, it's a prof, I guess,
Mhm.
who I felt could have adjusted to
Mhm.
our needs a bit better. So for context, I really thought about dropping a class. And
Oh.
I was supposed to go through it, but I found out that that class was a prerequisite to everything else. So
Oh
if I
no.
don't take it, or if I don't pass the sem, or if I don't pass the
Mhm.
class this sem, I would have to wait a year. I would
Mhm.
have to extend my stay. So when I asked my prof about, their INC rules and everything, they basically told me that they do accept, submissions after the SEM,
Mhm.
but everything else, all of the outputs would be automatically graded as a 3, which is, passing.
Mm. Mhm.
And regardless, like whether or not, that output is good or not, you'll just get an automatic 3. And I honestly felt like after everything, I don't deserve that. So people
Yeah.
who are currently struggling, they don't deserve that. While I
Mhm.
get that the prof was basically leaning towards fairness, maybe
Mhm.
the prof was looking at the big picture and thought that it's only fair for them
Yeah.
to do that. I don't think you could measure fairness give
Mhm.
current
Mhm.
setup. I think
Mhm.
um just because someone decided to pass early, it doesn't necessarily mean or doesn't necessarily reflect on the entire batch. So that put like
Mhm.
a huge pressure on me, and that almost broke me in a sense. So I felt like the
Mm.
prof could have adjusted. At least the prof could have would have give at least, um it wasn't a 3, maybe a 2. I would understand if it was an automatic 2, since
Mhm.
you know it doesn't necessarily have you don't necessarily have to give me a perfect grade, but
Mhm.
I just wish that you would have graded me a lot more fairly. So that's one thing.
Mhm.
So I think, yeah, I I think the prof could have been a lot more understanding. The system itself, like the
Mhm.
higher ups, the admin of my uni,
Mhm.
they could have done more. So that's one thing. But other than that, I think I had like a safe space. I've had people
Mhm.
support me throughout the sem, so everything's good.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And hopefully that prof doesn't watch this. Anyway, as of right now, the most time you've spent is in school, or we've spent a lot of time for school and stuff like that. Are there insecurities that you ended up gaining, or it ended up enhancing while being in school? Like, is it because of school? Like, it's not actually elsewhere that started it, but school itself like made it worse.
Yes. So does it have to be, college? Does it have to be
It
about
doesn't.
college?
It doesn't
Okay.
have to be college. Yeah.
So I was a very socially awkward kid, like
Mhm.
really, really socially awkward. And one thing that really enhanced was basically my awkwardness, my insecurity, and me not really
Mhm.
believing in myself because I
Mhm.
used to be part of a very small group. I was in a small school. It was run by
Mhm.
nuns, and as much as I had, like a great bond with the nuns, like they were really nice. Um, the school, the teachers themselves were very, very bad.
Oh.
Um, they would I think I remember one time. I think it's something that I really downplayed for a while.
Mhm.
But one thing I remember, I was in the first grade, and we were basically the teacher basically instructed us to like stand up whenever we had certain features. So, for example, so I
Oh.
would say this in Tagalog. Okay,
Okay.
pag matangkad ka, tayo. So if you stand up,
Mm.
if you're tall, you stand up. If you're short, you stand up. So it was basically that. And you know how the Philippines is with Eurocentric features, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't have I don't have the prettiest nose. So basically that's um
Mhm.
and one thing okay, scratch that. I have a pretty nose. Okay. It's more
Yeah.
of
But
we
it
have
made you
pretty
feel
noses.
you didn't have one.
Yeah. Kasi
Mhm.
there was this one, whenever, that thing happened. So if you're tall, stand up. If you're pale, stand up. So kahit
Mhm.
kumaputi ka, taas ka.
Mm.
And the teacher would basically call you out. For example, if you're not fair enough, you're like, no, you sit down. You're not fair. Or yeah, or
Oh.
stand up. You're dark. So it was that. And there was basically that one part with noses and the the teacher was basically like, okay, kung matangos ang ilong mo, tayo ka. So
Mm.
I stood up because when you say matangos, it automatically means you have a pretty nose.
Mhm.
Especially given that time or that era,
Yeah.
Eurocentric features talaga yung ano.
Uh-huh.
Um, and the teacher was like, no, pango ka, sit down.
Ah.
So it was very bad for me. Like
Mhm.
I mean, while you could say that it can be downplayed, that it's not,
Mhm.
the reality anymore during that time, it was basically the set beauty standard. If you have like
Yeah.
a tall nose, if you have like a
Mhm.
straight nose bridge, it means
Yeah.
that you're pretty. But if you don't have like a pointy enough nose, it means
Mhm.
you have a bad nose. So that's one thing that really like struck.
Yeah.
That was in a sense very toxic for me, and it
Mhm.
I guess it was a start of like many other body issues. But right
Mhm.
now, I feel like I'm coping a lot better. I've accepted, but it was definitely something that took me a while to process.
Mhm. Wow. Admittedly, on the spectrum of beauty standards, I can't say much of being, like that, because that's also something like Craven kind of mentioned last week. Like his insecurity was also based on physical features, but not like the tall or anything. It was about it was the acne. It was more of because he doesn't usually get acne and stuff like that, and then people like you know kids being kids, like pointing out things that can't be changed in an instant, like, oh, why do you have that on your face, something like that. So he
Yeah.
mentioned that, and now you're mentioning this, and I'm good that you're getting over it and that you're dealing with it properly. And I just want to say to those who also are listening, if you do feel that, okay, so it's just supposed to be descriptions, they're not supposed to be a basis if you're beautiful or not. Like matangos just means tall, and pango just means it's like flat, like that. But flat or tall. It's not supposed to say,
Yeah.
oh, you're more beautiful if you have a tall nose. You're more beautiful if it's straight. No, whether it's flat or tall, it is beautiful. And it is sad that when you say matangos or pango, it's instantly like, oh, it's beautiful,
Yeah.
ugly. When in fact,
I
it's just
think
supposed to be just adjectives to define how it looks
that's
like.
very
It's not.
true.
Mm-hmm. And I kind of relate to you, not necessarily like instant, because like growing up, so mine is not necessarily that tall or that short. Like my nose, you would see it like this. Like growing up, it actually became more straight now. But before, when I was younger, it was kind of still flat. So I would also be like, what was the point of it? Like I would remember people. So I have these features, and I'm blessed with it. Like in the sense of blessed at the time in the beauty standards, I kind of fit everything in a sense, like how my face looks. But then I would hear, pero sayang pango kasi kasi like they would say it as if
Yeah. Yeah.
like as if one flaw made it nothing. Like, oh, you have
Yeah, you're
lovely
pretty butt.
eyes,
It's
you're
the
pretty,
pretty
but
butt
yeah,
in schools.
yeah,
Like, yeah, and one thing to note is that, when you're not picked as like the muse or like a part of the
mm,
pageant, you automatically feel bad because it means that you don't fit the standards. And
yeah,
while, things have definitely changed, there are different like beauty
mm-hmm,
standards and it shouldn't be an issue now. Definitely
yeah,
during our time, it was very,
mm-hmm,
it was a trend,
it was.
it was really a trend. If you're the pretty kid, you automatically get all of the benefits.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
thing.
And I think, okay, on my side though, on the side of like quote quote pretty privilege, I'm not saying I hate that I got it, but it's more of it was toxic in the sense that I also felt I was prettier because of that, like I
Yeah,
would also end up judging other people, and at the end it like I ended up hurting other people because I would say things because another person would say it. Like growing up, as you can see, I am fair for a Filipina. It's not like, you know, and then people will be like, oh, wow, you're so pretty, you have white skin. And in my head, that automatically meant, okay, if pretty is white skin, then automatically
yeah.
darker
There's
than this is ugly.
yeah,
Like they
there's
didn't
that
have to
pretty, but
tell me that. But like
mm-mm.
in the process of elimination, I started thinking like that. And so when I would see someone with dark skin, I would immediately think like, ha, I have white, like that. And that was
Yeah,
toxic. Yeah.
there's that
And
thinking like just a pretty
mm-hmm,
butt.
mm-hmm. And for me, it's I gradually learned to like unlearn these things, but it was a toxic mindset for a while. And sometimes I even think about it. Like at times I'll be like, oh, like those thoughts like other people would say, like, oh, they would be prettier if they were like whiter, like those
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
It's so it's messed up. It's like
It's
I didn't.
it's something that you learn. It's something that you.
Mm-mm.
It's not something that's already within you. It's something that you
Yeah,
learn from other people. So I think it's really
exactly.
great that we're very inclusive. That we have like
Mm-hmm.
another spectrum of
Yeah,
these beauty standards, and we're basically taught right now that everyone is beautiful in their own way, which is
mm-hmm.
really really
Exactly.
great for the upcoming generation.
Yeah, I'm really happy for them. But there is a little cons and pros to the new generation with certain things, with how extreme stuff are. But we're not going to talk about that. Anyway, so since you mentioned the system a lot, what is exactly something you really want to change to make it a healthier environment? Like what exactly in the system, or what's something you want to put in? Maybe it's just lacking something, or something you want to take out, or is it the entire thing, you want to change? Like, so how would you say it will become healthier in your opinion?
In terms of the school system in general, I honestly think
Mm-hmm.
we could deal with less load. The Philippines
Mm,
college system, we're often like bombarded or flooded with
mm-hmm.
general courses that we don't necessarily need. We've dealt with senior high. You don't have to do the extra courses anymore. So
Yeah, that
that's
is true.
one thing I would definitely take out. It's useless. That's all I could say. It's a
Yeah.
waste of our time. It's time. It's time that should be spent on are actual, specializations rather
Mhm.
than extra classes. I mean, if you would like to learn, let's say certain classes, certain subjects, you could take them
Mhm.
as electives. But, there are many parts of the system that needs, in a sense, it's a very, very confusing. Like, you made us suffer through that for what? So that's one thing.
Mhm.
In
Yeah.
terms of my school in general, I honestly feel like we're doing quite well for
Mm.
a college. One
Mm.
thing I would really consider right now is that, lengthen the sem. That's all it is. Like,
Mhm.
you, you make sure that you give your students and and your faculty enough time to accomplish everything.
Mm.
We're not like Craven School.
Mm. Yeah.
We were not like Craven School,
Yeah.
and basically making us like Craven School. So basically,
Mhm.
it's that thing. Also, I feel like, in a sense, one thing, since our school is very progressive and we're often being red tagged, I feel like, generally, I feel like we should be more protected by our school. Instead of,
Mm.
like, there's a flaw, and there are many flaws in the system. And one thing
Mhm.
that the school could do better is actually protect us rather than apologize for, our misdemeanor, even though we're
Yeah.
protesting for our rights. So that's one thing.
Mhm.
So in general, I feel like, there has to be a lot of, changes in the school system in
Mhm.
general, Philippine school system. But I feel like it would take hours to really like digest. So those are like
Mhm.
my top twos. So
Your
in
top
general,
two.
and my school.
Yeah. Those are really good points, and hopefully someone in, in those departments will hear this and listen to it. Yeah. And it's actually great how you mentioned that they should take out like the courses or the subjects that are not needed, because in college it really should be like specialization already, like from kinder to like high school. It's just meant to make you think, oh, why, what do I like, like what are the subjects that interest me, and it's just to give you this basic information just so you know them. But you don't necessarily need the other subjects unless they're actually really needed. Like maybe it's a minor thing, not the most biggest part of your course or the career you want. And if it's needed, then fine. But like the other things, like it's completely different. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And and from what I know, there's also other colleges that are just different, like other universities that are actually just like really specific on specialization as well. So it is possible to have that here in the Philippines. So yeah, and it's also great that you really, you're, instead of like fighting the how the culture is in your school, it's better to protect them because it's already there. Might as well
Yeah.
protect them instead of like fighting it. Yeah, those are amazing points. Now, um, is it being in that toxic environment school? Were you in any point in time healthy, but then eventually just did not become one? Like it eventually just got consumed. So in your experiences, do you think it is possible to still stay healthy though, like even if you were in that environment?
I honestly feel like, there are ways to cope, and I personally think that I'm able to cope. But
Mm-hmm.
going through like a tough school setting really,
Mm-hmm.
um, caused a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being in high school, like during senior high. Anyways, I feel like it is, in a sense, healthy with time management, but I do
Mm-hmm.
see that there has to be, you know I do see that there is this barrier, in a sense that not everyone has, like, stellar mental health. Not everyone
Mm-hmm.
has privileges, and I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing, really. Privilege really is something that could help you really cope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um as difficult as it is, like, especially during the online setting. I
Mm-hmm.
honestly feel like, there would be better coping for everyone if everyone had,
Mm-hmm.
like, not the equal amount of money naman
Mm-hmm.
or privileges, but
Mm-hmm.
that capability to really learn in a comfortable setup. I think
Yeah.
that's one thing. I think that's one thing that's difficult, especially since we're in a country that is very we're in a country wherein like most of the people are in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to really consider. You can't really have like a
Mm-hmm.
healthy setup if your environment is unhealthy,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't really force
Yeah.
yourself to stay positive. It's helpful, yes, but
Mm-hmm.
I think beyond the school system, it's also the Philippine system as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean I have the ability to cope, but I can't speak for everyone. I can't
Yeah.
speak for the masses. So that's one thing.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, there is a possibility, but it also comes with how privilege, which is not a bad thing. Just to emphasize, having privilege is not. It's just unfortunate that not everyone has it. Not everyone has, let's say, good internet connection or the best gadgets or even a room. Like having your own room, especially in like online learning nowadays, it's a privilege in the sense that you could do it in the confinement. And like I've seen stories of how people, like, let's say they're living in a studio and you'll hear their family in the background and they can't really do much about it. Like they're all sharing the same space and it's not really their fault, and so it's really hard to, like, you know listen in the lessons with that dynamic going on. And it's not like in this online learning where you could go out, because that's the point, that the reason why it became online learning is because you're not allowed to go out.
Yeah,
It's not. Yeah, it's so
yeah,
sad to hear people, especially the ones in the school, saying, oh, is it my problem that you don't have a laptop? Is it my problem that you don't have an internet? And it's just really terrible. Yeah.
yeah. I've heard of a prof, like one of my friends is profs. They basically told them like in class, um like internet connection isn't an excuse because the prof bought like two Wi-Fi routers. So if
Mm-hmm.
the prof can do it, the students can do it also. So that
Oh,
there's that thinking. Like if I can
yeah.
do it, you can do it. If your classmate can do it, then you can
Mm-hmm.
do it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's basically that. It's like you're not working
Yeah.
hard enough. So
Mm-hmm.
it puts that guilt and pressure on you.
Yeah. And something that I learned about internet here is just that not everyone can have that access based on
Yeah.
money as well. And I personally right now has been experiencing really bad internet just because something about um there's no line here anymore. Despite everyone having a line, we can't get one anymore because of several different things. And even if we have the money, them themselves, like, oh, we can't do it. And that's just like, that's not on me anymore. Like even if,
Mhm.
you know and it's also like, I don't like the idea how, like, oh, if I can do it, you can do it too. It's like you're thinking that everyone's living the same life, everyone has the same amount of monetary means, and it discredits all that they're going through. It's sad that they're just like, oh, if I can do it, you can do it too. And that's not the case. That's really not the case for everyone. And I guess it also doesn't take account like specific things. Let's say if they're a scholar, like if they're a scholar student, and there's a reason behind that, like because they don't afford it. Like why would they become a scholar student if they could? I mean, there are those who can afford and become a scholar student, and that's a different topic. But like there are some that they really can't. So it is not necessarily like it's meant to be an excuse, like, oh, we don't have, but it's just something, it's a problem. It's not an excuse, but it's an actual problem that I need help with. They're saying that I don't have internet, so help me out, like help me do something. Yeah. And last year I saw like so many stories of like people just like going climbing on the top of the rooftops just for better internet connection, just to like send their deadlines, and it's just so sad.
It's really sad.
Mm-hmm. And so you had your personal, um searching of how to cope and not cope. So how would you summarize the things that did help to those who are overwhelmed right now with the toxicity of being in this online learning environment recently?
So one thing I would really advise everyone is that, don't blame yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your fault that you can't cope. We're going
Mm-hmm.
through so much right now, and one thing you could do for yourself is put yourself first. I know that everything is incredibly difficult. There is that pressure everywhere, and you may feel like it's a race. But honestly, your well being is more important than you
Mm-hmm.
winning these awards or really accomplishing, these
Mm-hmm.
lessons at school.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we're not, everyone's in like in different boats. Some people have, like, there are students who have scholarships and they don't have a choice. There are
Mm-hmm.
people who want to graduate early so that
Mm-hmm.
they can help their families. But honestly, just a little act of like kindness um will really, like, take you a long way, will really work in a sense. Like, make
Mm-hmm.
sure that you're always kind to yourself. If you can't afford breaks right now, then make sure that you allot at least a few minutes of you time in order to
Mm-hmm.
cope. Make sure that you're sleeping. Overall, if you have the capabilities to take care of yourself, please do. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to go through it alone, guys.
Mm-hmm.
um, if you have someone to confide to, if you have friends that could help you cope, family members, do not
Mm-hmm.
hesitate to approach them, because again, we all need a helping hand. So it really takes, a lot of strength to go through everything. And even though, I may not know you personally, I'm very proud of you and you
Mm-hmm.
got this. So that's my message.
Yeah, that's great. And I'd just like to add to that because you mentioned like awards and certificates and all those things. And I want to emphasize that you should not base your identity or your worth on those things. You should base it on the grades and everything. I'm not saying that these grades don't matter, but you matter more than these grades. This doesn't define you as a person. It doesn't show if you're kind, if you're loving, if you're caring. Like these are in at the end of the day, it's if you're a good person and it doesn't if you're failing really badly, if you're having a hard time, yeah, it should not define you. It should, yeah. And now those were a lot of things that I personally just didn't think about, so I'm also glad that you opened about them. Like there were certain things that like, oh really, like, so I'm glad I also learned from this. And thank you for coming. And before
Thank you
we
so
end,
much.
yeah, and before we end, I'd like the floor is yours, like to plug anything you want to share, your socials, and any business that you have, or go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ian, for having me. I learned a lot
Mhm.
from you as well. Like, I honestly found this very productive. It's like one of the
Mm.
most productive days I've had. So thank you. One thing for me to plug, I guess, would be my personal IG. It's
Mhm.
Illuminati, so Illuminati, but like with the L. So that's basically my handle. Also,
Mhm.
I also read cards. So, um, I have a tarot page called The Blessed Bee
Mhm.
on IG and on Instagram and on TikTok. So you can go ahead and follow that as well. So thank you guys.
Yeah. Okay. Those are, I've actually seen them. I personally don't follow them because of my own beliefs, but if you guys want to, go ahead. Ali and I are good friends. Like we both respect each other's beliefs and everything. But something that a few friends of mine, a few family members mentioned, like you have certain friends that are not of the same belief, and I was like, okay, I get it. But yeah, personally for me, to those who like seen certain things, yeah, I don't believe in them, but I respect my friends, so I'm not gonna outright and say those things are wrong to me. I have my beliefs, they have their beliefs, and we're good as friends. There's nothing there. Anyway, thank you once again for your time, and I
Thank
hope you have a
you.
good like school life ahead of you. Yeah.
Thank
Mm.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. Make sure to check out my socials, my friends' socials, and Toxic Talk socials in the description below. Once again, I encourage you to ask questions that will be answered on that 19th episode. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you are notified when the next episode goes up. As you wait, you can check out all my YouTube videos on my channel. Take care always and stay safe. Bye!